She didn't wake up one morning and decide to miss you. It started the moment your absence became louder than your presence ever was. Listen closely. I'm not here to flatter you or to sell you hope. I'm here to tell you the part no one admits out loud. The psychological moment when a woman realizes the man she took for granted is no longer emotionally available, and something inside her quietly breaks. When you were there every time, when you answered quickly, when you adjusted your needs to keep the peace, your value became invisible. Not because you lacked worth, but because the human mind adapts frighteningly fast to consistency. Familiarity dulls emotional alertness. What is always available is subconsciously labeled as safe, predictable, and eventually background noise. Most men think women leave because they stop loving. That's rarely the truth. More often, they leave because the relationship stopped stimulating emotional contrast. You became reliable, not resonant. Present, but no longer felt. And here's the part that stings. She didn't realize what you were providing while she had it. Emotional regulation, stability, a grounding presence. You were the nervous system calm she leaned on without noticing. So she pushed, tested, withdrew. Looking for feeling, not understanding she was dismantling the very thing keeping her steady. Then something shifts. You stop chasing clarity. You stop over-explaining. You stop bending yourself into shapes that fit her mood, not dramatically, quietly, subtly, and the female brain, wired to track emotional patterns more than words, registers a disruption. Her nervous system notices before her ego does. At first, she rationalizes it. He's busy. He's changed. I needed space anyway. But the body doesn't lie. The emotional feedback loop she depended on is gone. The man who absorbed her stress, validated her uncertainty, and remained anchored through chaos is no longer accessible. This is where missing you begins, not romantically, but physiologically. She checks her phone more. She replays conversations. She wonders why your energy feels distant, even when you're polite. Because the brain interprets loss of emotional availability as threat, and threat creates focus. Focus creates longing. You see, desire isn't born from being needed. It's born from being felt and then lost. When you were always available, she didn't need to feel you. Now she does and can't. That's the uncomfortable truth most men never hear. Women don't miss men because of grand gestures. They miss the emotional regulation those men provided when it disappears. They miss how they felt being with you once that feeling is no longer accessible. And the cruel irony? By the time she becomes aware of it, you've already stepped out of the role that made you invisible. Not out of anger, out of self-respect. That's when the psychological gravity reverses. Here's where most men misunderstand what happens next, and where they accidentally sabotage themselves by trying to interpret her behavior emotionally instead of psychologically. When a woman starts missing the man she took for granted, she does not suddenly become warm, apologetic, or vulnerable. That would require her ego to move faster than her nervous system, and that almost never happens. Instead, she becomes confused. Confusion is the first symptom of emotional withdrawal hitting a delayed nervous system. Her mind starts scanning for explanations that protect her self-image. Because admitting "I undervalued him" feels like admitting incompetence in emotional judgment. And the psyche resists that at all costs. So she tests. She might reach out with something trivial, a memory, a casual question, a joke that doesn't require emotional exposure. This is not reconciliation, it's calibration. She is checking whether the emotional door is still unlocked. If you respond the way you used to, eager, overinvested, relieved, her anxiety settles, the threat disappears, and the missing fades again. But if you respond calmly, briefly, without emotional hunger, something far more powerful happens. Her brain doesn't register relief. It registers loss of control. This is where missing deepens. The female emotional system is highly attuned to relational leverage. When she sensed she had emotional priority, she relaxed. When that priority disappears, her nervous system escalates. She begins replaying interactions, searching for the moment she miscalculated your limits. This isn't manipulation, it's survival wiring. Humans attach more strongly to what they believe they might lose. And what she believes she lost isn't just you, it's the emotional certainty you represented. She starts noticing your absence in places she never credited you for filling. The quiet moments, the emotional stabilization, the sense that someone had her back without asking. And here's the critical part most men never understand. She does not miss you because you became distant. She misses you because your distance forced her to feel what your presence used to regulate. That emotional labor you provided, she's now doing it alone, and it's exhausting. So the thoughts intensify. Was he unhappy? Did I misread him? Why didn't he say something sooner? Notice how the questions subtly shift responsibility away from her awareness. This is the ego trying to restore balance without self-blame. But beneath those questions is something more raw, emotional disorientation. You were predictable, you were stable, you were psychologically safe, and now, without you offering that consistency, her internal state fluctuates. Desire doesn't come from comfort alone, it comes from the contrast between comfort and its absence. That's why trying to explain yourself ruins the process. When you explain, you give her cognitive closure, and closure shuts down longing. Silence, on the other hand, forces introspection. Not the romantic kind, the uncomfortable kind. And as days or weeks pass, something crucial happens. Her memory edits the past. The mind doesn't replay reality, it replays emotion. She remembers how she felt when things were good, not how she felt when she was complacent. This is where missing turns into emotional gravity, not because you changed who you are, but because she finally felt what it's like when you're not quietly holding everything together. Now pay close attention, because this is where power silently shifts, and where most men ruin it without realizing what they're standing in. When a woman truly starts missing the man she took for granted, it is no longer about attraction in the traditional sense. It becomes about identity. Her mind begins asking a far more dangerous question than, "Do I want him?" The question becomes, "Who am I without the version of myself I was when he was there?" You weren't just a partner. You were a mirror that reflected a calmer, more secure version of her. And when that mirror disappears, she doesn't just miss you, she misses who she was in your presence. That's why the emotional pull intensifies when you don't chase clarity or reassurance. Her nervous system is now doing what it avoided while you were present, self-regulation, and it's struggling. This is the stage where nostalgia hits, not the honest kind, the selective kind. The brain highlights your patience, your steadiness, your emotional availability, while quietly deleting the moments she dismissed them. This isn't manipulation. It's how the psyche protects itself from guilt while still allowing longing. She may scroll through old messages, photos, even arguments, but what she's really searching for is confirmation that you were real, that the safety she felt wasn't imagined. And here's the uncomfortable truth. The more emotionally grounded you become during this phase, the more destabilized she feels. Not because you're cruel, but because you're no longer orienting yourself around her emotional state. This is where men often panic. They mistake her renewed interest for a green light to overgive again. They rush to reassure. They reopen emotional access without boundaries. And the moment they do, the psychological tension collapses. Missing requires space. Desire requires uncertainty, but not chaos. Clarity without availability. If she reaches out more directly now, it may sound sincere, curious, even vulnerable. But understand what's happening underneath. She is trying to restore the emotional ecosystem where she felt secure without having to confront how she undervalued it. And this is where your silence, or rather, your emotional neutrality, becomes transformative. You're not cold. You're not punishing. You're simply no longer negotiating your worth. That forces her to face something most people avoid, the cost of emotional complacency. She begins to see you not as the man she had, but as the man she could lose permanently. And the brain treats permanent loss very differently than temporary distance. This is when regret starts forming. Not dramatic, not tearful, but heavy, quiet, lingering. Regret isn't loud, it's persistent. It shows up in late night thoughts, in comparing others to you, in noticing how rare emotional steadiness actually is. The dating world doesn't reward consistency the way people think it does, and she's starting to feel that contrast now. What she took for granted wasn't just your affection, it was your emotional leadership. And emotional leadership, once removed, is deeply missed because most people don't realize its value until they're forced to lead themselves and discover how unprepared they are. That's when missing becomes something deeper than desire. It becomes respect. This is the final shift, and it's the one that determines whether missing becomes transformation or regret that follows her quietly for years. By now, she doesn't just miss you. She understands you, not perfectly, not romantically, but accurately. She sees the emotional labor you carried without announcing it, the patience she leaned on without acknowledging, the stability she assumed would always be there because it always had been. And here's the hardest part for her to swallow. You didn't leave to punish her. You left because something inside you matured. Growth is terrifying to someone who benefited from your former self. And this is where men often get confused. They think the goal is to make her come back. But psychologically, the real shift has nothing to do with reunion. It has to do with reclaiming identity. When you stop negotiating for emotional recognition, you stop teaching people how to undervalue you. Your absence didn't teach her because it hurt. It taught her because it revealed contrast. The difference between being supported and being alone with her own emotional patterns. Now she sees you differently, not as the man who was always there, but as the man who chose himself. That choice rewires perception because self-respect is rare, and once someone witnesses it up close, they can't unsee it. Even if she never says it out loud, even if pride keeps her silent, the imprint remains. This is why trying to extract an apology is pointless. Apologies satisfy the ego, not the psyche. What actually changes people is loss paired with clarity, and you gave her both without cruelty. If she reaches out now, it may come with honesty, or nostalgia, or a softened tone. But the most important thing is not what she says. It's who you are when she says it. Do you step back into the version of yourself that needed to be chosen, or do you remain the version that already chose himself? Because here's the truth most men never hear from anyone who actually understands human behavior. The moment a woman truly misses the man she took for granted is the moment that man has already outgrown the dynamic that diminished him. And that's not tragic, that's evolution. Whether she returns or not becomes secondary, because you are no longer anchored to being seen. You are anchored to being grounded. And grounded men don't disappear emotionally. They simply stop overextending where they are not met. So here's the question I want you to sit with, and answer honestly in the comments. If she suddenly saw your value now, would she be meeting the man you used to be, or the man you've become? If this resonated, like the video. Subscribe for deeper psychological truths most people are never taught. And share this with a friend who's still wondering why walking away felt like the hardest and healthiest decision of his life.